What if the most lethal weapon is neither visible nor comprehensible? An enigma that rewrites every rule you thought you knew. On October 20th, shockwaves rippled across the globe. Reports flooded in from the front lines. An impossible weapon had appeared. It was not listed in any arsenal, not flagged in any intelligence briefing, and it seemed to defy even the logic of modern warfare. Online, shaky footage captured a single, blinding flash tearing through the sky. No roar followed, no blast, no debris, only a cold silence and a ghostly trail lingering in the clouds, as if reality itself had glitched. The world collectively held its breath, searching for meaning in a phenomenon that offered none. Seasoned generals and analysts were at a loss. No one could name it, classify it, or even agree on what to call it. Was it a missile? A drone? Theories multiplied, but none fit. In hushed meetings, one phrase kept surfacing. Putin has outmaneuvered the world. Official channels denied everything. Yet fragments leaked, cryptic messages, fleeting hints of a top-secret test. Rumors described a weapon that fused the velocity of a missile with the mind of an autonomous machine. It seemed to select targets on its own, ignoring every known defense, unbound by any previous command system. As hours ticked by, fear seeped into the halls of power. If this weapon was real, it might shatter the fragile balance of global security overnight. Centuries of military doctrine, and the very definition of safety, were suddenly in doubt. How did we arrive at the brink, where one unknown system could upend the order of the world in a single day? To understand, we must retrace our steps and examine how the battlefield itself is evolving. This is not the first time a new technology has upended the world's sense of safety. When gunpowder was first used in warfare, armies who clung to swords found themselves obsolete overnight. The first ironclads rendered wooden navies powerless. The atomic bomb, with a single burst, taught humanity that the rules could change in an instant. Let us uncover the origins of Orbital and reveal how this system slipped past every safeguard. First, we must revisit the hidden race for battlefield supremacy. The quieter the corridors of power become, the more fear grows beyond their walls. When rumors first surfaced about a mysterious weapon deployed at the front, Russian officials issued a dry, routine statement. It was, they claimed, only another scheduled test, nothing unusual. But those who watched closely saw something that could not be explained away. Independent witnesses described attacks with impossible precision. Even the most advanced air defenses, built over decades to counter any threat, were rendered powerless before they could react. Stranger still, the weapon did not obey the known laws of physics. It appeared, disappeared, and reappeared somewhere else, almost like a ghost slipping through reality. Almost simultaneously, Western research centers detected something even more unnerving. A whole network of satellites monitoring the area suddenly went dark. For several long, critical minutes, their signals were cut off. This was no accident. Experts quickly dismissed coincidence, fueling heated arguments about the arrival of electronic warfare so advanced it could blind satellites, our very eyes in orbit. If these reports are true, this marks a leap so profound it threatens to redefine military strength itself. Yet, Russian and international leaders alike remain silent. Their refusal to comment is more alarming than any official statement, stirring wild speculation. Perhaps this was never just a test, but a warning for the world. Those who have seen the aftermath agree. The age of predictable front lines is gone. The battlefield has shifted, destroying old beliefs about safety and control. This is not a subtle change. It is as if the ground itself has moved, leaving behind those who cannot adapt. Consider the Maginot Line, once France's ultimate defense, rendered irrelevant in weeks by new tactics and technology during World War II. History repeats. Each time a new weapon arrives, it makes old strategies look naive. Misjudging this moment could mean spending billions on the wrong protections, or worse, leaving entire nations exposed to threats they cannot even detect. The stakes have never been higher. But what exactly is the orbital system, and why has no one been able to find, name, or understand it? As confusion deepens, intelligence agencies scramble for answers. Every clue becomes a race against time and uncertainty. Spy satellites are redirected. Signal analysis teams work around the clock. Even civilian astronomers are drawn in, scanning the skies for any anomaly, any clue, any evidence that could help piece together the puzzle. How do you defend against a threat you cannot see, cannot follow, and may never fully understand? This is the crisis now gripping the world's most advanced militaries after the appearance of Russia's enigmatic orbital system. Its propulsion, guidance, and flight patterns defy every known category, neither missile nor drone, but something wholly unprecedented. Not a single radar array on Earth, not even the most sophisticated in NATO's arsenal, has managed to catch more than a fleeting, ambiguous signature. Unlike traditional weapons, Orbital does not depend on satellites or outside navigation. It generates its own orientation field, maneuvering with an eerie autonomy that disregards the systems the West once believed unbreakable. Military analysts now speak of the dawn of thinking munitions, weapons guided by deeply woven algorithms, able to learn from their environment, adapt to shifting targets, and rewire their own strategies on the fly. To understand the leap Orbital represents, recall the transition from human-guided bombs to precision-guided munitions during the Gulf War. Then, the world was stunned by weapons that could home in on a target with meter-level accuracy. Orbital, by contrast, appears to process its environment in real time, adapting to countermeasures and changes in the battlefield faster than any human operator could react. It is as if the weapon itself is learning, evolving, and anticipating every move of its adversaries. Most disturbing is Orbital's capacity to disappear into the digital chaos of modern conflict. It leaves only ghostly traces, digital echoes camouflaged as random background noise, evading every known method of electronic surveillance. In command centers across the globe, operators stare at empty screens, haunted by the certainty that something is moving, unseen, just beyond the range of comprehension. There are no obvious flight paths, no early warnings, just the escalating tension of waiting for an invisible strike. This uncertainty is corrosive. With each deployment, Orbital undermines its adversary's confidence. Officers are forced to second-guess every anomaly, to question their doctrines, and even their senses. Doubt spreads. Commanders hesitate, fearing either a catastrophic miscalculation or a deadly oversight. In this new era, victory belongs not to those who strike hardest, but to those who can make their enemies distrust their own reality. International responses fracture between disbelief and panic. Some officials dismiss Orbital as a myth or a technical fluke. Others, more anxious, warn of a fundamental rupture in military technology, always adding a wary, "if this is real." Behind closed doors, Allied defense planners scramble. Security doctrines are being redrawn. Countermeasures, once considered reliable, are now desperately re-examined. The entire strategic blueprint of Western defense, built over decades, suddenly seems fragile. If the old methods of detection and response no longer work, even the most powerful nations risk being blinded, circumvented, and rendered obsolete. The familiar balance of power, once predictable, now totters on the verge of chaos. The last time the world faced such a shift was the dawn of nuclear weapons, when every prior calculation about war and peace suddenly became inadequate. Yet the true impact of Orbital goes deeper than hardware or tactics. This is not just a new weapon. It is a signal that the rules of warfare are changing, where uncertainty, perception, and fear are wielded as weapons more powerful than any explosive device. As the world grapples with Orbital's implications, leaders and strategists must confront a battlefield where old certainties have vanished. The race to adapt has already begun, and no one knows who will set the rules. When dread of the unknown outweighs fear of what is seen, who truly commands the field? Orbital is not merely a weapon, but an intricate living network. Mobile launchers, autonomous relays, sensor mirrors, and concealed ground nodes all pulse together, forming a seamless, adaptive machine. This system does not wait for orders. It senses, learns, and shifts its strategies in real time, often faster than any human or artificial intelligence can react. While old arsenals hunt for targets, Orbital quietly reshapes the entire environment, turning certainty into quicksand. Its most unsettling power is not in conquest, but in denial of information itself. Orbital weaves voids, sensor blind spots, blackouts in data streams, and shadows across satellite feeds. It does not just confuse, it breeds doubt, eroding trust in both algorithms and human judgments. Analysts call it a fracture in the observation continuum. For the first time, the ability to perceive the battlefield is contested territory. Soldiers, commanders, even heads of state are left questioning what is genuine and what is manufactured illusion. Inside Russia, debate erupts. Should Orbital be displayed to intimidate, or concealed to avoid global chaos? Moscow makes a bold choice: reveal just enough. The message: adapt instantly or become obsolete. Rivals are forced to abandon decades of doctrine virtually overnight. Within mere days, neighboring nations redraw their defense blueprints. Raw firepower yields to autonomy, resilience, and the capacity to operate where sensors deceive and signals disappear. The fight now centers not only on weapons, but on the very machinery of perception. A new arms race dawns, psychological as much as technological. Countries scramble to invent tools that survive in shadow, expose the hidden, and restore faith in both machines and people. Yet the upheaval does not end at the front lines. When information becomes as contested as territory, entire societies risk losing faith in their own judgment. National leaders could freeze, paralyzed by data they cannot trust. The border between reality and deception begins to dissolve, threatening to reverberate through every layer of modern life. To appreciate the scale of this shift, consider how the invention of the telegraph changed the speed of warfare, or how the radio allowed real-time propaganda and psychological operations in World War II. Orbital's effect could be even more profound, as it undermines the very ability to know what is happening. But the gravest danger is not reserved for generals or presidents. It is only now that the true peril starts to take shape. As Orbital's reach expands, no one remains untouched, from the corridors of power to the screens in ordinary homes. The shockwaves are only beginning. When your senses can be deceived, how do you protect yourself? What happens when the boundary between real and artificial is erased, not by imagination, but by technology? Here lies the most unsettling truth. The core technologies behind Orbital are no longer locked away in remote military facilities. They have already begun to seep quietly into daily life, woven into transportation networks, energy grids, and the digital fabric of public infrastructure. What was once the exclusive domain of the armed forces is now threaded invisibly through our cities and homes. This change erases the last clear line between war and peace. The difference between military innovation and civilian utility is dissolving, multiplying the chances for unexpected and sweeping consequences. It is no longer obvious where the battlefield stops, or who, in the end, is truly at risk. Inside the highest circles of defense, a debate rages. As these systems gain autonomy, are we on the verge of losing control? Machine intelligence now learns and adapts in real time, moving faster than any human overseer can follow. What if a single miscalculation, a flaw in a line of code, a rushed automated reaction, triggers a chain reaction that no one can halt? The room for error shrinks toward zero, but the price of a mistake soars toward everything. This is not just a technical puzzle, it is an existential threat. A single algorithmic malfunction, within the power grid, in the air, or far above in orbit, could cascade through entire systems, sowing confusion, causing outages, or even plunging a nation into chaos. No one can foresee every side effect. No one can guarantee that errors will be caught before they spread. Among experts, the split is deep. Is this the ultimate evolution of military doctrine? A psychological masterstroke that paralyzes adversaries, keeping them off balance and uncertain? Or is it a reckless wager, risking the safety of millions on black box technologies that not even their creators fully grasp. Each promise of control is shadowed by a warning about unintended consequences. And perhaps the most formidable weapon is not a missile or a drone, but a sense of uncertainty itself. Psychological dominance now matters more than firepower. A society that fears the unknown is easier to destabilize than one afraid only of what is visible. With the rules rewritten, unpredictability becomes the new frontline. Fear outpaces facts, and the power to manufacture doubt is now a strategic advantage. If we fail to adapt, the danger is not just falling behind in a new arms race. We expose our own civilian infrastructure to invisible sabotage, to failures we cannot foresee, and to threats we may not even recognize until it is too late. The old rules for security no longer apply. Uncertainty is now the only certainty. But what exactly is Orbital, and how did it come to exist in the first place? To understand its origins, we must look back at a series of breakthroughs that changed the rules of the game. Orbital's inception did not happen overnight. Decades of advances in artificial intelligence, electronic warfare, and sensor networks laid the groundwork for such a system. In the early 21st century, Russia and other powers began investing heavily in autonomous weapons projects, inspired by the success of drone swarms and loyal wingman programs in the West. The aim was always clear: to create platforms that could operate beyond human limitations, learn independently, and resist jamming or hacking attempts. Consider how, in the 1960s, the United States developed the first electronic countermeasures to jam enemy radar. Each advance inspired a counter-advance, with stealth aircraft like the F-117 Nighthawk built to evade detection. Now, Orbital represents a leap beyond stealth, not merely hiding from sensors, but actively corrupting the very flow of information, creating false realities on the battlefield. The first prototypes, according to leaked documents, combined machine vision with adaptive flight controls. Early tests were failures, crashes, misidentifications, and uncontrollable behavior. But with each iteration, the algorithms improved. By the late 2010s, Russian research groups were experimenting with hybrid propulsion systems, allowing for erratic, unpredictable trajectories. By the early 2020s, the integration of quantum-resistant communications and self-healing code made Orbital's core architecture virtually immune to interception or sabotage. Perhaps the most chilling breakthrough came with the development of distributed sensor arrays, tiny, passive devices scattered across the landscape, feeding real-time environmental data to the system. This allowed Orbital to see through fog, electronic clutter, and even deliberate deception. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a living organism, feeding on data, adapting to every change. In one unconfirmed incident in 2023, a Western reconnaissance drone vanished over the Black Sea. Days later, analysts found only a burst of encrypted data and a sudden spike in atmospheric ionization, signatures now believed to be an orbital test run. The message was clear. Not only could the system strike, but it could erase its own tracks, leaving adversaries chasing phantoms. In this environment, even the most sophisticated countermeasures become suspect. Western nations poured funds into next-generation radars, but, as with the French Maginot Line, these defenses may already be obsolete. The lesson is harsh: adapt or become irrelevant. So, what can be done? History offers limited guidance, but it does provide some clues. When the British faced the V-1 buzz bomb during World War II, they responded with new detection nets and quick-reaction fighter patrols. When the first intercontinental ballistic missiles appeared, nations built early warning satellites and automated command centers. In each case, survival depended on rapid adaptation and creative thinking. Today, the challenge is not only technical, but psychological. The first step is to admit that uncertainty itself is now a weapon. Military planners must invest in redundancy, not just in hardware, but in decision-making. Training must emphasize agility and critical thinking, not just rote procedures. Networks must be designed to fail gracefully, so that a single point of confusion does not cascade into disaster. At the civilian level, education and public awareness become crucial. When manipulated information can paralyze a society, fostering skepticism and digital literacy is as important as building bunkers or stockpiling supplies. Communities should be taught to question the sources of their data, to recognize digital manipulation, and to prepare for ambiguity as a new normal. Legislators and regulators have a role too. They must demand transparency and oversight in the deployment of autonomous systems. International agreements, while difficult to enforce, can at least create norms and red lines. The world learned, after the horrors of chemical and nuclear weapons, that some boundaries must be recognized, even if only as moral guideposts. And yet, there will always be those who exploit the gray areas. Orbital is the product not only of technical genius, but of strategic calculation. Its designers understood that the greatest victories are won not by overwhelming force, but by making the enemy doubt their own senses, hesitate, and ultimately freeze. In a world where silence cuts deeper than any bullet and uncertainty is wielded like a blade, you are faced with a choice. Will you keep watching what is shown to you, or start seeing what lies beneath? This is not simply a story about a new missile or a shadowy technology. Orbital has ripped apart the old battlefield, leaving only questions in its wake. Where power was once measured in firepower and speed, now it is measured in what remains unknowable. By refusing to confirm, to deny, or to clarify, Russia has done something more potent than revealing a new weapon. They have induced doubt, deep, consuming doubt, that stretches across every border and into every war room. Defense ministers, intelligence chiefs, and military analysts on every continent are now united not by certainty, but by paralysis. Each is forced to question every assumption, every sensor, every strategy. Consider what this really means. If nobody can say for sure how a weapon functions, where it is hidden, or when it might strike, then the bedrock of global security begins to fracture. The world's most advanced radars and warning systems are suddenly as useful as flashlights in engineered darkness. What once made nations confident, the power to detect, to predict, to intercept, has been inverted, turned against them. This is psychological warfare, but not the kind that announces itself. This is the whisper in the air that tells every leader, "You do not know. You cannot prepare." The most destructive force now is not the weapon itself, but the fear it creates, the paralysis of not knowing. Whole strategies grind to a halt. Decisions freeze. The unknown becomes a weapon more powerful than any warhead. Why should this matter to you? Because when the rules of conflict change, so does the world you live in. Governments shift your money into new threats. The news you trust becomes riddled with uncertainty. The very idea of safety, they make you question everything you thought you understood about war, safety, and truth. But there are ways forward. History teaches that when the old certainties shatter, societies can adapt, if they act with vision and resolve. The answer is not to yield to fear, but to build resilience, in technology, in institutions, and above all, in the human mind. The story of Orbital is, at its core, a challenge to awaken, to see, to question, and to prepare for a future in which the greatest weapon is the unknown itself.